Well, good afternoon, fellow constitutionalists, and welcome to the Free-4-All-Friday edition, where we're going to have a real good argy-bargy today of the Dan Clements Show, a Christian political talk show. I'm your host, Dan Clements, your constitutional warrior, fighting for your right just to be an American. It is August 25th, the year of our Lord 2017. Remember, we're hyphen-free, PC-free zone. God is still in control, and He does love you. And I'm broadcasting live from the Hemlock Studios here in the beautiful central Susquehanna Valley in the great Keystone State. I'm always glad it's Friday. I've always been that way. It's not that I don't like working. It's just, you put the weekend, you put it in, you work, whatever your job is. And most people have the weekend off. Some people don't, but most people, like me, lazy bums like myself, have the weekend off, although it's not totally, I don't totally take it off. For some reason, I just can't switch off. I'm following the news. I'm still reading books, which, matter of fact, I've been meaning to show this to you. It's called The Intimidation Game by Kimberly Strassel. And this is just out this year. And I tell you what, I'm already about a third of the way through it. I've only been reading a little bit each day. Well, I'm a little over a third of the way through it, and folks, it's a page turner. It really is. And Kimberly goes through and chronicles the political abuses against free speech in this country by the Republicans and the Democrats. It's not just, I guess you could call it a nonpartisan look at it, but she does a very good job of actually just presenting the facts as they are, not how people want to see them. She doesn't cast Republicans in a better light than she does the Democrats, and she sort of takes peels back or opens up the curtain, as it were, like on the Wizard of Oz, and exposes both parties in that. So it's been a very good read so far. Like I said, for me, it's a page turner. It is a story, and she does sort of tell it like a story. I guess not sort of. She does tell it like a story, but it's a story with all these facts that she puts in there, these researchable facts you can actually look at. So it's only about a 300-page book, and I plan on doing some more reading on it later today. And maybe instead of watching my Saturday morning Western, I was thinking about taking that couple hours to read a few more chapters out of this and try to get the book knocked out of the way as soon as possible. Because once I get the book done, then I feel confident I can email Ms. Strassel and see if I can set up some type of interview with her for on the show. That would be fantastic for you folks. It would be fantastic for the show because there's a lot of interesting things she brings up in there. And this is, again, as I've been talking about all week, and I'll continue to talk about all week. I forgot to turn my ringer off on the phone. Hang on a second, folks. I thought I turned that off, but I guess I didn't. That was just saying I got an email or a text message. I'll check that after the show. But what I've been talking about all week about freedom of speech. Without freedom of speech, the rest of our rights are nothing. If we can't redress the government, if we can't protest what the government's doing or what another group, and this is very, very important, what another group of Americans are doing, if we can't protest that, then what good are the rest of our rights? If we cannot make people aware of what folks are doing, then, like I said, what's good? What good are the rest of our rights? So it's very, very important for us to understand this. We're going to talk about a few more things here. As I promised yesterday, the first thing we're going to get into is After Charlottesville, Virginia by Chris Ann Hall. A very good, well-written article. She does a very fantastic job on these articles, and I'd love to interview her someday on the show also. But I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. Let's get into some GearXS.com. They're an affiliate market of mine. They have sales. They have daily sales going on every day, and they sell clothing, they sell camping gear, they sell patio gear, swim gear. Whatever the season is, they sell, and it's good quality products. They get good reviews, and they're just, I think they're just a fantastic company. So if you like what you hear on the show, go over to thedanclemenshow.com and click on the Gear XS widget and find out about all these sales and get on their mailing list. But please support the show by going to the Dan Clements Show and clicking on the widget there. All right, today's daily Bible reading comes from the book of Psalms, chapter 23. A lot of people know this one, but I'm going to read this. New King James Version is the version. Verses 1 through 6, the whole psalm. Not very long at all. A psalm of David. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup runs over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. You know, here's David, a man after God's own heart, where he's actually talking about how God takes care of him for God's sake and for our sake. And this is, to me, this is fantastic. It's one of these verses, one of these short chapters in the Bible that just really speak to me about God's presence in our lives and how he takes care of us. Today's quote mail comes from J. Gustav White. Our faith and our friendships are not shattered by one big act, but by many small neglects. Amen. And I have one here. I don't normally read the short Bible lesson, but this is a good one. It's called Ignoring the Ominous Storm Clouds Won't Make the Tornado Go Away by Mike Riley over at gewatkins.net. And Mike says there is a thought-provoking above title article by by Brother Fenter Norton that I recently read in the April-June edition of the Magnolia Messenger on page 9. Now this, I don't know if they don't date these bulletins articles that I get, but the article from the Magnolia Messenger is from the April-June edition that they put out. As a matter of fact, I've never heard of them before, the Magnolia Messenger, so I went ahead and got on their mailing list, and so I'll start getting their PDF, and it's a decently done electronic publication, and a lot of churches are going to this now. But anyway, in his article, Brother Northern emphasizes the fact that ignoring the ominous storm clouds of immorality in our nation won't make the problems go away. He points out the fact that our country must change its ways, or God will render judgment on it, just as he did to the ancient nations found in history books, Psalms 9:17. Let's seriously think about the thoughts that Brother Northern has presented in his article and take any necessary action. Now, I want to go back over there to the book of Psalms chapter 9 and verse 17. Read that real quick. The wicked shall be turned into hell, and all the nations that forget God. Okay. Now, the article that Brother Northern writes here, he said, as Rush Limbaugh will say, in my formerly nicotine-stained fingers, that's been many moons ago. He says, the signs of national peril are all about us that politicians continue to ignore. Corrupt politics, immoral politicians, self-interest above the collective good, buying elections, graft, greed, guttural language, religious prostitution, wide open sexual promiscuity, inept leadership, or re-election sought first at the expense of representing the good of the people, and appeasement sought with diabolical enemies hell-bent on our destruction. The country has sated itself in luxurious living until we are at the brink of financial collapse and unwilling to discipline our lavish appetites. We just borrow tons and tons of money from all people, the communists. He's talking about China, and America borrows way too much money as a country, as individuals, yes, as a country, yes, even more. Is it time for Is it time for America's demise? I say that with great sorrow as I review the past 80 wonderful years of my life in this country, except for perhaps the last couple of decades when Satan has run amok with TV and other media. Listen to God's Word. That's why I'm misreading this, because when they print this in the PDF, it's not apostrophe. There's an I in there for some reason. Anyway, listen to God's Word that many just mock. Can the rush grow up without mire? Can the flag grow without water? Whilst it whilst wow, this PDF is not printed out right. Whilst it is yet in the greenness and not cut down, it withereth before any other herb. So are the paths of all that forget God, and the hope of the godless man shall perish, whose confidence shall break in sunder, and whose trust is a spider's web. Job 8, 9 through 14. This is double underscored by the psalmist in 9:17. The wicked shall be turned into hell, and the nations that forget God. We, the United States of America, are included in that. All we have no divine exemption from the Almighty, regardless of how many liberalized churches are built to let them worship as they please without mentioning sin. Either this country must change its ways, or, as the psalmist said, it shall be turned into the grave of undisciplined great nations that now are only a paragraph in history books. Ignoring the ominous clouds will not make the tornado go away. Sorry about that reading, folks. When they print this PDF out, there's a lot of mistakes in that they didn't catch, and I don't know why. I don't know why that was the case. But anyway, we talk about this on the show a lot, about how we ignore things. There's an article I want to get to from the Washington Post. Satan is good. Christians are responsible for Charlottesville. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. And the Washington Post publishes this. And the problem with that, and I think the CEO of Amazon is keeping his politics separate from Amazon. He's running Amazon as a business, but he also owns the Washington Post. So as the owner of the Washington Post, I can't help but think that he's allowing the Washington Post to print the things that align with his political agenda. Now, as long as he doesn't mix the two together, I don't care about Amazon. There's way too many companies. I'm going to talk about PayPal here. There's way too many companies out there that allow politics to drive their business. Now, I know that the politicians in government have just overreaching, unconstitutional overreach into businesses, and businesses are afraid of that. And I understand that. I really do understand it. They want to stay in business, so they have to sort of walk the tightrope here. But the government is unconstitutional in that respect, and businesses, I just wish some of these businesses would grow a backbone and stand up to the government and say, what you're doing is wrong. And maybe take them to court. Take them to court. Okay? And I know, I'm reading this intimidation game, and I know there's a huge intimidations going on out there with a lot of people. Out there. And it amazes me how many people, and I've been intimidated before, and I don't back down. I haven't backed down yet, and won a few, lost a few, but I don't like being intimidated. Really, I don't like being intimidated by anybody. I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're the government. I don't care if you're the Democrats. I don't take kindly to intimidation. And I will, whatever means necessary, I will fight back in kind. And that's my nature. I just wish corporations would actually grow a backbone and do the same thing. But anyway, go ahead and read that article. Ignoring the ominous storm clouds won't make the tornadoes go away. We're ignoring way too much here in America. As Christians, we don't preach enough about the gospel. We don't preach enough about God's mercy, his justice, and his judgment. People have to know. And lying to them doesn't make the problems go away. Allowing news outlets, the lamestream media, to lie to the American people without challenge isn't helping the American people at all. They almost remind me, and if you've read through the Bible, you know what I'm going to say here, or hopefully you know what I'm going to say here. Reminds me of the prophets of old before Israel was carried away into, or Judah and Israel, the children of Israel, were carried away into Babylonian captivity. At the time of the captivity, there was two Israels. There was Judah, and the southern tribe and the northern tribe. They were divided kingdoms. The northern tribe went into Assyrian captivity, and then the southern tribe was taken away by the Babylonians. And but one of the things that preceded that, there was a lot of false prophets that were out there saying that God is still on our side. We're not. We're His chosen people. He's not going to carry us away into captivity. Don't worry about it. Go about your business. Nothing to see here. And that sounds a lot like the lamestream media we have today. I shared with you on yesterday's show that they looked at President Trump's speech the day of Charlottesville on Saturday, and he covered all his bases. But since it wasn't good enough for them, they had to lie about it, and they had to tell people that President Trump is this and that when he's not. The Phoenix rally, same thing. Don Lemon was just beside himself, saying, just bashing the speech. And I'm like, I watched the speech, and I'm like, and political speeches, was it the best I've ever heard? No. But was it bad? No. Was it what Don Lemon and CNN and their cohorts, thought it was? No. I don't know what they were watching. They weren't watching the same speech I was watching. And folks, you know what they're doing. They have an agenda. The agenda is, by all means necessary, we got to bring down the Trump presidency. By any means necessary. And so they're any means necessary, and they think they're justified in this, lying to the people that watch them. Lying to the country who watch them. And there's a lot of people in the world that watch CNN. That's their go-to news channel. And so they feel justified in this lie. But it's still a lie. And honestly, justifying lies, I'm not saying I don't lie. It's not my habit to lie. But for me to justify my lies rings hollow. It's just like Black Lives Matters, and we talked about them yesterday. I got a couple videos I want to share with you today on that. There's 3 videos I want to share, but I can't share the second one. Antifa gets violent at Trump protests in Laguna Beach. And basically what it is, this guy goes around, talks to these folks, and asks them why they're protesting. Now, I watched the video. I can't show it to you on this program without doing some editing on it. And however, the editing will take out some of the better answers. Because this guy's walking around with a ball cap. Listen, I know I have some kids watching or listening to the show. I don't know if they're watching. I'm going to give you a 5 count to get out of the room. I'm not going to be vulgar, but I'm going to give them a 5 count to get out of the room. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Boom. This young millennial's walking around with a black baseball cap with male genitalia on top of it. Now, I didn't see in the video where he explained why he was wearing a hat, but for me, that hat displays a message I don't think this young man understands he's displaying, if you know what I mean. Okay, you can bring your kids back in. So I can't show that video to you without editing, and if I edit it, it'll take out some of the good answers. So I'll just put it up there. If you want to go watch it, be forewarned. There's adult content in there. It's not speech, it's visual. So there's that one. But I have this One American News Network video about the Black Lives Matter organizer demanding free housing and money from white people. And then I have another one. It's a Facebook video. Disgusting. Black Lives Matter student activist argues that all lives don't matter. This Black Lives student, and we'll go through the video here, to me, it's very disgusting, his ideology. And it needs to be defeated. It absolutely needs to be defeated. And I think the 2 guys that were talking with him didn't do a very good job. The 2 white guys in there didn't do a very good job of putting down his arguments. And again, there is in America, native-born Americans, there are nobody that's born today that was born into slavery. Matter of fact, blacks in America have more opportunity, more freedom than they've ever had. This whole thing, and I don't care if I get in trouble with this whole thing of Black Lives Matters is ginned up. It is ginned up. They took a few bad police incidents and pretty much destroyed Ferguson over that. And that, I don't care what side you come down on with that. I sort of come down, and I'm still not 100%, I sort of come down on the policeman's side. Because they have video of it. They have video. There's other videos of other cops doing bad things. The cops need to be held accountable and understand that. But to blame the whole white race for a couple people is ridiculous. It'd be just like me telling you, and we talked about this week on the show, Monday on the Civil War show and everything, This guy named Anderson was the first slave owner in America, and he happened to be black. And some of the responses I got off of that, and some of the articles I've read about that, and with my Facebook antagonists out there trying to argue against that, and they can't, they say, well, what does it matter if there were some blacks in the South that owned slaves? And I'm like, what do you mean, what does it matter? That's important because most people think that that didn't happen or didn't know that that happened. And she tried to school me in some history that we'll get into here real quick here while I'm talking about this. Well, you don't understand what's happened in Africa. Well, yes, I do. Black tribes were fighting other black tribes, and this was something that was happening long before the slave trade, going across the oceans. What was happening was these tribes would enslave each other. They'd have fights, the loser would lose, and they'd enslave each other. And you know what? That's not unlike what the American Indians were doing to each other. Not unlike it at all. But you never hear, and I'm not doing a whataboutism. I'm just pointing out some simple facts in history that there's no race out there that their hands are clean when it comes to slavery. There just isn't. And to try to justify your whatever you're trying to justify about slavery is ridiculous. Slavery is bad no matter who's doing it. And I'm pointing out, like these folks that want reparations for slavery, I asked them, are you going to go back out and weed out the ancestors of the black slave owners? Now, they weren't as many as the white slave owners, but you're going to go back and weed those out, and any bloodlines, any family lines that descend from them, are you going to make them pay reparations too? Then, are you going to separate out folks like my great-grandpa McCarville didn't come here until the early 1900s, so, and he's Irish. Didn't have anything to do with the slave trade. Are you going to weed that bloodline or those family lines out, saying, well, you don't have to pay reparations? Are you going to do that? And they've been asked some of those questions. Now, I've never heard them ask the one about the black slave owners, but I've heard people ask about, well, my parents didn't come over here till after the 1900s, till slavery was well over with, and it's like, why do we have to pay reparations? We weren't there. Matter of fact, there isn't anybody living today that was a slave owner. And they can't prove, I'm sorry, they tried to prove it, and they haven't proved it to me, that this whole nation was built on slave labor. When slavery was, even of the South, of the whole population of the South, slavery and the slave holders only made up less than a third. So there was 2/3 of the population down there that didn't have slaves, and that were farmers and shop owners and merchants and stuff like that were trading and stuff. So this whole reparations thing is so convoluted. There's no way. There's absolutely no way you can figure it out. And so if you can't figure it out, then just drop it. Don't say that all these white people owe us whatever. I don't owe you nothing. I don't care what your skin color is. I don't owe you a dime. You go out and earn that. Have never oppressed anybody. And this is the problem with identity politics. They want to identify all whites as supremacists, all whites as racists, all whites as neo-Nazis. And it's like, that's the biggest problem with identity politics. They lump everybody together. I don't lump all blacks together. I know all blacks aren't part of Black Lives Matter, because I know some right-thinking blacks out there. There's one that called in the show this week from St. Louis, Missouri. He would agree with me. And as a Christian, and that's why I titled the show today, as a Christian, all lives matter to me. I have no authority from God to discriminate against anybody on the basis of their race, their ethnicity, where they come from. No, I have no authority from God to do so at all. And in my life, that's where my supreme authority comes from. And so yes, to God all lives matter. And if all lives matter to God, because Jesus Christ died for everyone, he didn't just die for the white race, he didn't die for the black race, he didn't die for the Asian or whatever. He died for all mankind. And if Christ died for all mankind, and I'm supposed to preach the gospel, I'm supposed to go into the world and preach the gospel, then I have to preach it to all mankind. I cannot pick and choose. And we'll stick to race here. I cannot pick and choose based on race who I'm going to preach the gospel to. Well, that would get me in trouble with God. And that has to, folks, that ideology has to permeate all of my life. All of my life. Not just my Christian life. It has to permeate my political life as well if I choose to be political. I know churches in the South, churches of Christ in the South, and this is a condemnation on these folks, that they have their white churches and they have their black churches down in the South. And that, to me, that's wrong. That's absolutely wrong. And it makes me so mad that even in the brotherhood, even in the Church of Christ, that we have folks that think along this way because of how they're raised, instead of changing their thinking to align with God and Christ and their teachings. Okay, let's get into this article by Chris Ann Hall. It's very good that she, let me get in there. After Charlottesville by Chris Ann Hall, she published this on August 14th. And the links to the chrisannhall.com show and everything's over there. She got a podcast. She has a live show that she does. Like I said, I don't catch live shows so much, but I do download her podcast and listen to them on my MP3 player. She starts off, let me start off by saying, I do not support or condone or defend any of the words or actions created by the white supremacist ideology. However, I'm hearing some very dangerous rhetoric coming forward from the violence that occurred in Charlottesville, Virginia. We need to understand the danger of this rhetoric, not just for our own safety, but for the security of future generations. A pastor recently tweeted, every person who turns up at a white nationalist rally should be arrested. And this was something that was posted because of the Charlottesville, okay? This pastor speaks of out of ignorance, and his ignorance will serve to imprison him one day. Guilt by association is a Marxist principle. America was formed upon natural law, which establishes that all people have a natural right to life, liberty, and his property. Frederick Bastiat makes this point very clear in his book, The Law. Each of us has a natural right from God to defend his life, his liberty, his property. These are the three basic requirements of life, and preservation of any of them is the preservation of the other two. Among these natural rights is the right to freedom of speech. Freedom of speech is so essential to all freedom that if members of a society are denied this fundamental right, no other rights are secure. Benjamin Franklin wrote of this in his silence do-good letter in 1722. Without freedom of thought, there can be no such thing as wisdom and no such thing as thinking as public liberty without freedom of speech. This sacred privilege is so essential to free government that the security of prosperity and the freedom of speech always goes together in those wretched countries where a man cannot call his tongue his own. He can scarce call anything anything else his own. Some of this old writing, for some reason, I'm having a hard time today with that, folks, and I do apologize. If members of a society can be limited in their speech by government force, then there is no defense of any life, liberty, or property, no peaceful defense at all. The consequences of establishing a government punishment of speech is twofold. First, Franklin shows us that without freedom of speech, there is no public liberty, no such thing as wisdom. In that understanding, Franklin explains that without freedom of speech, all public liberty of the people is overthrown. Whoever would overthrow the liberty of a nation must begin by subduing the freeness of speech, a thing terrible to public public traitors. Thomas Jefferson expounded upon this principle when he said, if a nation expects to be ignorant and free in a state of civilization, it expects what never was and never will be. Without freedom of speech, without the public wisdom that comes from it, all men in that civilization are slaves to the government approved and dedicated narrative. The second consequence to speech controlled by government force is the establishment of a dangerous precedent. Thomas Paine explains this danger. And avidity to punish is always dangerous to liberty. It leads men to stretch, to misinterpret, and to even misapply even the best of laws. that would make his own liberty secure must guard even his enemy from oppression. And if he violates this duty, he establishes a precedent that will reach to himself. So we have to defend other people's liberties too, folks. Even if you don't agree with what they're saying, you still have to defend their right to say it, in other words. When we invite government to oppress the speech of your enemy, you set a precedent for government to oppress you when the times have changed and the government finds your speech a threat. This should be the most compelling motivation for this pastor to defend freedom of speech and association. History is replete with government punishing religious speech. It is not a history we should ever want repeated in America. Freedom of speech and freedom of association go hand in hand. They are also intimately related to, the designer of our constitutional republic placed them both in the First Amendment within our Bill of Rights. You cannot have one without the other. However, liberty is not without its limits. These limitations are necessary for the preservation of liberty as a whole. John Leland, a designer of our constitutional republic, wrote, government should protect every man in thinking and speaking freely and see that no one does abuse to another. Government's obligation to our rights is to secure them, not regulate them. Government securing of our rights does not involve regulating or punishing speech or freedom of association. There ought to be only one limiting factor to our liberty, as Leland and Franklin both state: your expression of liberty cannot harm or control the right of another. And again, I've talked about this a lot. Your rights cannot violate my rights. If they do, then they're not rights at all, and vice versa. Okay? Freedom of speech, which is the right of every man, as far as by it he does not hurt or control the right of another, and this is the only check it ought to suffer and the only bounds it ought to know. Being offended is not a harm. It is a consequence we must suffer to ensure liberty's survival. We must prosecute people for their actions, that is true, but arresting and prosecuting people for what they say or for simply being with people who say offensive things will lead America down a path of government oppression we cannot allow. We must limit the government's authority to those actions that result in the harm or control of another. We cannot give government authority over the words or associations. If we give government this power today to control speech we don't like, then tomorrow our own words and associations may come under the wrath of government when the government doesn't like what we have to say. Liberty is not easy. It's not simple. But we must know, as John Adams proclaimed, liberty must at all hazards be supported. We must also know this truth. We must suffer the rantings of fools to ensure that the voice of truth has its day. The future generations of America and relying upon us to make the right choices. We must choose liberty first. I prefer the tumult of liberty to the quiet of servitude. Thomas Jefferson. This is a fantastic article by Chris Ann Hall, and I've learned a lot from her about the Constitution. This is one of my mentors in the Constitution. And I like what she has to say in there, and the way she puts it, especially with Thomas Jefferson, Ben Franklin, Tom Paine. It just amazes me how many people think that your speech offends me. Therefore, you shouldn't be allowed to say it. Well, that to me is an offense, because that tells me you're not intellectually strong enough to listen to somebody else's point of view or arguments, that you need to be sheltered from it. And if you need to be sheltered from it, I'm sorry, you shouldn't be there. Whether it's politics, religion, or somewhere else. If what I say offends you, and you want my freedom of speech taken away because of the offense, be careful. Because someday, someone might take offense to what you say and want that taken away. And want your freedom of speech taken away because what you said was offensive to somebody. And you know what, folks? Again, if you're not intellectually strong enough to stand some offense, then maybe you shouldn't be there. And I've seen, like this video I can't show you because of what this guy's wearing on his hat, which I didn't notice till I was halfway through the video. I'm like, oh man. And like I said, I don't think that guy understands the message he's conveying. What they're saying, what Antifa is saying offends me. It offends my American sensibilities. It offends my freedom and liberty sensibilities. But you know what? I'm not going to stop them from saying what they're saying. Do you know why? A teachable moment. You've heard me use that term 1,000 times on this show, and I'll continue to use it. It's a teachable moment. I can take that and teach folks what's right through reason, through truth, through facts, and through logic. I can show you what they're saying is not right at all. Now, since we're talking about Charlottesville and stuff like that, I want to get into this video about Black Lives Matters and what they're actually saying. And this lady, she's an organizer for a local Black Lives Matter group. But the thing is, I haven't yet seen any recriminations about this. So let me get this set up and we'll play this real quick here.
A leader of the Black Lives Matter movement in Kentucky is under fire for her racist remarks after publishing a list of demands for white people. One America's Pearson Sharp has more.
Following the violence in Charlottesville, Virginia, Black Lives Matter is making the news for yet another controversy. One of the group's leaders in Louisville, Kentucky, published a list of demands for white people filled with expletives and racist stereotyping. Chanel Helm is a core organizer and co-founder of the local chapter. Her list was published on August 16th by Leo Weekly, which is an alternative news weekly based in Louisville. In it, she outlines how white people are obligated to give black people everything from their money down to the very homes they live in. Helm asks white people to downsize and give up their homes to black or brown families, preferably ones from what she calls generational poverty. She also demands that white people change their wills and leave their inheritances to black or brown families. She goes on to suggest that if white people are planning to sell a property, they should instead give it to black families because they'll make back their money in, quote, some other white privileged way. Helm demands that white people make a monthly donation to black families and that housing developers should build complexes and let black people live there for free. She claims that white women are nosy and should try to get other white people fired for being racist, including their bosses. Finally, Helm urges people to physically attack white supremacists, saying, you got hands, use them. The racist post has seen a wave of backlash, and even supporters of Black Lives Matter say the article is insulting towards white Americans and comes across simply as hate speech. When asked if it was satire, Helm responded on Twitter by insisting her post was serious and was not exaggerated. Others, including self-described ultra-liberals, condemned the post as a bigoted anti-white rant. One immigrant from Germany said that though she has stood for racial equality her whole life, the notion of blacks committing revenge racism is never justified. Pearson Sharp, One American News.
All right, folks, that was the end of that video there. And again, we had an article about this on the show the other day, and I just want to point out a couple things here. One, when she was talking about these developers building these places and just letting black people live there for free, she has no understanding of capitalism. That statement is actually Marxist. And Marxism leads to communism, okay? Marx and Engels wrote, the Marxist Manifesto. And taking something that somebody else has earned and use their own capital to build and then try to take that and just give it to somebody else because of their skin color. And that's their only reasoning. There is no logic and there's no reasoning given in those other than that we're black, you're white, you have privilege, we don't, so we should get everything you have. And again, I've said this many times, I'm not rich by no means. Matter of fact, I'd consider me and my wife in the lower middle class financially, okay? And even more so, probably less in the middle class, since I haven't been able to work because of my fibromyalgia. But that's okay. That's okay. I'm not blaming anybody. I don't want to take something from somebody else that they earned that I don't have a right to. And just because you're black, you don't have a right to white people's stuff, no matter how oppressed you think you are, which you're not. I'm sorry. Isolated police shootings are not oppressions. They're just not. And I know people have tried to make this argument, but they're not oppressions, folks. Deal with them on an individual basis, but don't blame me for what a policeman does, what a bad cop does. And there's far more good cops out there than there are bad cops. I mean, far and away. And just to broad brush all cops in America as bad and that they need to be fought is illogical to begin with. Because again, you're attributing bad behavior from one person and extrapolating it to a whole group. You know, and it just, there's no reason to it. And her demands about, if you're going to sell property, give it to somebody that's in generational poverty. You know, well, why can't I sell my property and either invest the money in another property or put it away for an inheritance for my children? Why do I have to give it away to somebody just because of their skin color? Okay? And the other thing is, just because I'm white doesn't mean I'm a white supremacist or racist or neo-Nazi or neo-Confederate, whatever term you want to use. You just can't prove it. You can't prove I'm any of those things. I'm a public figure. I'm out here on YouTube. I'm on Blog Talk Radio. You go back. I got a body of work going clear back to 2008. You go ahead and scour that. You go ahead and scour that and see what I am. You know what I am. Leroy Jenkins, can we call in? Leroy, I've had some bad experience. I don't have a call screener. I've had guys call in and just flat out say some vulgar things on my show. And it's a Christian political show. And I have young folks listening to it. I have kids that are, older elementary, junior high age that listen to this program. And, they don't need to be exposed to that. So if you can 100% promise me that you're not going to be vulgar, not call in and be vulgar, I'll let you call in. So I see you in my chat room on YouTube. Do you have my call-in numbers for Blog Talk Radio to call in? That's where you have to call in at. So I'll let Leroy there get settled around here. Like I said, I don't like taking phone calls, but if they come in the chat room like that, I'll give them a chance. But trust me when I tell you, if you call in, I am taking your number down, and if you do get nasty, I will be calling you back. Trust me, I will be calling you back and giving you a piece of my mind. So Leroy, you can go ahead and call in if you have the number there. If you don't, let me know. I'll put it in the chat room there. So we had that video. Now this other video that I have here, folks, it's a Black Lives Matter student activist who argues that all lives don't matter. And again, he gives, and the video's chopped up, and I'm trying to find the full video. Turning Point America, I think it is, or America Turning Point. I got their URL. I'm going to send them a direct message and ask them, can I have the raw footage of that, if they have that, of this. It looks like a meeting, but they've chopped the meeting up. So be forewarned that this video is edited by this group. It was a Facebook video, and it is edited. So, I'll just let you be forewarned. And there's no, maybe they edited it because of swearing or something, I don't know. But you hear the gist in this young black man and what he wants and what he's thinking about. So let's give this a real quick listen here.
Because all lives have value.
Really? How so? Why does white life have value?
Well, I think my
For
life
who?
has
Why?
value.
No, excuse me. For who? Our argument is that white life is wrong.
Why?
Our argument is that we should never affirm white life. That your argument of just affirming all life in general is not good, especially not good for black people when white life itself is based off of black
shouldn't we affirm
civilization.
my life?
You're probably white.
I am white. Why shouldn't we affirm my life?
I don't understand why I have to care about your life anyways.
It's going to be...
There's no ethical reason as to why white people deserve to live. Affirming black life means that white death has to occur. That's why you should lose this debate and why your life ain't worth affirming.
Can I kill myself, under your arguments?
Sure.
Okay. So, should Odie kill himself?
I don't see why not.
Why should we do that? How does that help?
It's ethical.
How is it ethical? We all have some form or another of privilege. Why does that mean we should kill ourselves?
Because you have white privilege.
Why does having white privilege necessarily mean I should kill myself? Why shouldn't I struggle against the structures?
Sure, struggling against the structure means putting yourself on the line, putting your body on the line. Do it. Affirm your suicide. That's cool.
That's very good.
I hope you guys heard that because I'm still flabbergasted about listening to that. I just I can't believe it. No, and like I said, it's very heavily edited, so I don't know if he ever gets into the reasons, but there is no reason or logic to what he says. He's like, white lives don't matter, and because white lives are based on segregation, that can't be proven. My life is not based on segregation. So if my life's not based on segregation, that blows a hole right through his argument that white lives don't matter. Again, as a Christian, I got to be like my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, and all lives matter because he died for everybody. I can't go beyond that. And if I do, I'm wrong. And I need to repent, and it's sinful. And I need to repent of that sin. I just absolutely have to repent of that. And that's, folks, to me, that's so simple and easy to me. And just because you are of a different skin color doesn't give you the right and does not justify reverse racism. Because that's exactly what that is. He's looking at the white race that we all should die. And just because there's a minute, it's like 0.006% of the Americans' population that claim to be white nationalists, white supremacists, neo-Nazis, whatever, it's so small. It's so small that it's almost negligent. And that's not the way most Americans think. Most Americans don't think in these terms as a regular course of their day. They don't care about somebody's race. Quite honestly. Charles Barkley said, I can honestly say in my adult life, he's 2 years younger than me. He's 53. He said, I never give those statues one thought. That's great. You know, it never bothered him. He never thought, it never bothered him to the point that he was going to go out and protest or rally or anything. He's just never given a thought. And again, folks, I don't understand. I just don't understand these people. It amazes me the ignorance of the millennial generation. It really does. And I fear for our country. I really do. Which brings me to let's let's do the millennial song. This is fun, and this has a lot to do with the mentality of the millennials. So let's give this a listen here real quick.
Ding 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 ding. There he sits inside your local coffee shop, sporting a man bun and facial hair. Somehow he believes, although he has no job, that by his 30s he will be a millionaire. M-I-L-L-E-N-N-I-A. Gotta love millennials. M-I-L-L-E-N-N-I-A. Gotta love millennials. She posts lots of selfies on her Instagram with the quote that's inspirational. Hopes to change the world while wearing yoga pants, armed with her dreams and knowledge of essential oils. M-I-L-L-E-N-N-I-A. Gotta love millennials. M-I-L-L-E-N-N-I-A. Gotta love millennials. 27 years old, trying to make it on their own. Maybe start by leaving your past Criticism isn't easy for their ears. They feel like they know most everything. See, they grew up with undeserved confidence, 'cause they got trophies just for participating. M-I-L-L-E-N, M-I-A-L, gotta love millennials. M-I-L-L-E-N, M-I-A-L, gotta love millennials. In a couple of years, we will have to pass the torch. In a couple of years, they will be in charge, and one will be our president. Oh no. M-I-L-L-E-N-N-I-A-L, gotta love millennials. M-I-L-L-E-N-N-I-A, help, please pray for millennials.
All right, folks, I had to play that. It seems like it's these millennials are the ones that are really driving all this, and it's these millennials who really don't understand what's going on out there. They really don't. And it's amazing to me. It's just amazing to me how people let millennials get away with this thought process. And a lot of this goes back, folks, to poor parenting. I'm sorry. Where everybody got a participation trophy. They never challenged their children on their ideology, as it were, that they were starting to develop, and never tried to guide it. And folks, I don't care if they were liberal parents or conservative parents. Okay, they're on both sides. They didn't try to guide their children into the truth. A lot of times they were dogmatic about what they thought. And when me and my son get in some of these long, detracted debates, as it were, I'm always given reasons for my thoughts. I don't just put thoughts out there. I give good examples, give good reasons. You know, the one that took me back the most with my son, and he's in the upper age of the millennial generation, was his right to health care. And I extrapolated it out. I said, okay, let's say, you know, let's take your theory that, and I don't agree with it, but let's take your theory of right to health care. Does that mean you have a right to somebody else's labor? And he didn't understand what I was talking about. I said, okay, what I'm saying is, let's say because of the government takeover of health care, let's say we go to single payer, and because of government health care, doctors just don't want to do it. People don't want to go into the profession, and doctors just get opting out. They're doing something else. Because you think you have a right to health care and somebody else's labor, can the American government force people to become doctors? And he told me, absolutely. Yeah, because I have a right to health care. Absolutely. The American government can force people to become doctors. And I told him, I don't want to go to somebody that was forced to become a doctor. I'm sorry. I'm opting out of that, quite frankly. And so you see like I said, I give examples. He just, and this is the way a lot of millennials do. A lot of these millennials, they just, for whatever reason, they do this. Whatever reason they do this, but don't give any logic or reason why. There was no argument that he gave that said it was okay that the government force people to become doctors and nurses so he can have health care. Why can't that be mutually exchanged in the free marketplace? You know, doctors see, hey, there's a financial benefit for me doing this other than helping people. By helping that people, I'm taking care of a pain point that I can make a good living off of that. Okay? And then there's patients out there that need somebody to take care of them medically, so they seek out good doctors and they pay them money for that service. I have a right to my labor. I have a right to be paid for my labor, a fair market wage for my labor. and you don't have the right just to take my labor and do with it what you will. It's just like my freedom of speech. Just because my freedom of speech offends you, okay, it offends you. Either stop listening to it or figure out why it offends you and come back with a counter argument of why what I said offends you. But if you don't have a reasoned counter argument, well, I'm here just, one of the things this lady said, well, I'm here just to protest Nazis. And they just shouldn't be here. That's why I'm here. And just because somebody said that there was Nazis there, she was there to protest against them. That's a herd mentality. She couldn't give a reason. She goes, oh, you asked me on the spot. I couldn't give a reason. Why, any other reasons why I'm here. And I'm like, well, if it's that ingrained in you that you're against Nazis, it shouldn't matter if you're put on the spot or not. If you have a reasoned argument, shouldn't matter if you're put on the spot or not. Again, it amazes me the mentality of the younger generation and what actually offends them. Now, Washington Post. This one I thought was like dumb. I mean, it's an editorial, and this is an article by John Nolte. You've heard me quote him before over at the Daily Wire, posted on August 23rd. Washington Post editorial, Satan is good, Christians are responsible for Charlottesville. Every time you start to believe the Washington Post cannot go any further off the left-wing rail, along comes another sweetheart of lunacy. 7 days ago, WashPo published an editorial justifying violence against Trump supporters. If you thought that was some pretty far-off stuff, a few days later, we were served up with an editorial that openly called for banning conservative speech on campus. Crazy, right? Nutso, right? What's going on here? Why is one of the leading establishment news outlets in the country offering its impromptu to dangerous lunatics advocating in favor of political violence and fascistic speech-killing policies? Fascist, okay? Fascistic. Come on, don't be cute. We all know why. This is WashPo's way of slowly but surely legitimizing these ideas, and both of these un-American ideas, silencing the right through the use of force, and ideas the mainstream left have secretly longed for decades. When you boil the left down to its essence, what you get are violent tyrants, all too eager to control and organize society at the point of a gun. And that's exactly what Antifa is doing. That's exactly what Black Lives Matter is doing. That's exactly what these fringe groups on the alt-left, I don't even call them fringe anymore, as big as Antifa is actually getting here in the United States. As big as Antifa is, and I'm just going to put it under the white supremacist movement in the United States, as big as Antifa is, the white supremacist movement, even if they got everybody around that supported them, they couldn't even fill a couple college classrooms to the brim. That's how minuscule they are in this country. Can the Washington Post get any worse, you ask? Oh my, yes. Yes, it can, you silly boy. Because when it comes to the left, it will always, always, always get worse. Behold, Exhibit A. Behold the words published by WashPo this very day informing us that Satan is good. The Satan of modern Satanism is a metaphorical icon for Enlightenment values. Satanism adopts a mythical backdrop that we feel is more befitting to modern culture than the monarchical, feudalistic, theocratic superstitions of old. The satanic temple, far from endorsing crass nationalist tribalism, actively fights for individual sovereignty and secular values. Now, the one point in that little rant that I have to I have to disagree with, Satan does not like individual sovereignty. He doesn't. No, in no way, shape, or form does he like individual sovereignty. So these folks that wrote this editorial at the WashPo or worded this at the WashPo have no clue what individual sovereignty is. Individual sovereignty, I stand sovereign before the sovereign of the universe. I make my own choices. And as a group of Americans, we are sovereign over government. And we make our own choices. Okay? As sovereign individuals, we can make their own choices. In that respect, you could say that about them, but really, Satan does not like sovereign individuals or individual sovereignty, because it means they can choose. And Satan doesn't want them to choose. Satan doesn't want to give them a choice. You see what I'm saying? Because if there's a choice between good and evil, more people choose the good over the evil. So be careful of that. Now check this out. Not only Satan is good, Satan is awesome. Finally, it must be said that nothing could be more antithetical to modern non-theistic Satanism than racist ideologies. We embrace a large diversity of individuals from a wide spectrum of political and cultural backgrounds, but we are all unified by our respect for individual rights and pluralism. It is axiomatic within Satanism that individuals must be judged for their own actions and their own merits. And that is, look folks, the biggest lie that Satan has told the world and has actually convinced a lot of people is that he doesn't exist. This may sound good on the surface, but it's a trap. It is an absolute trap, folks. The article goes on, the audacious lies, the moral and historical illiteracy are naturally of a forehead-slapping variety. Although it is simply a fact that Christians practicing Christian beliefs, that Christians who properly interpreted scriptures become the heart and soul of the American abolitionist movement, it is also true that it was through the words and actions of devout Christian William Wilberforce that after thousands and thousands of years of slavery, civilization's eyes were finally opened to the basic idea that slavery is an evil, a concept no one had ever considered previously. Nevertheless, slavery in the United States was traditionally and rather credibly, from a theological perspective, justified on scriptural grounds. Okay? And finally, behold the words published by WASPO this very day informing us that Christianity is evil and even responsible for Charlottesville. The vision for a Christian nation persistently fought for by evangelical theocrats with its refusal to accept cultural diversity holds that there is but one right way to live our lives, one lifestyle for all households, only one acceptable religious outlook that should be dictated to the nation at large, one God for one people. Is it really so mysterious that some among them might decide there's a right race as well? If we're going to confront the violence of Charlottesville in any constructive manner, we're going to have to do better than the devil made me do it. WASPO's whole "Oh Satan, yes Satan" pitch does at least make one thing clear. Democracy dies in darkness. It's not a warning, it's a goal. And nothing could be further from the truth with what they said in this article here about our Christian nation. They misunderstand, and I put this out, and this is the reason why I say this on my show, that my walk with God, my walk with Christ, informs the rest of my life. And that's exactly how the founding fathers thought about this too. That they were Christians, and there's so many proclamations, folks, and I've shared them on the show. I've actually, in the past, before I started doing the video, if I needed a fill-in show, I would let Dr. David Miller of Apologetics Press, I would share one of his talks in audio form talking about this. He footnotes everything. You can get the whole series of the Silencing of God and the other videos and books that go along with it, with all the proclamations in our early country that nobody had a problem with because they weren't demanding that everybody follow these things, but they were appealing to God for his providence, all these other things. And nowhere in these proclamations, nowhere in Christianity can you say that, well, there's a right race as well. Because God looks at the hearts of men. Christ looks at the hearts of men. Christ didn't die for one race. As I said throughout this show, Christ died for all mankind. Men, women, Doesn't care what your skin color is, doesn't care what your ethnicity is, doesn't even care what your religion is. Christ died for you. So for the WashPo to actually go this far with this type of article, I'm glad I don't subscribe to them. And they're one of these papers, along with the New York Times, that is losing money and subscribers hand over fist. And again, the owner of Washington Post also is the owner of Amazon, but you don't hear his politics in Amazon. And I'm hoping he keeps it that way. I really do. I hope he's not like PayPal. And I just found this out the other day. PayPal hit so hard for removing conservative sites that it changed its mind to avoid a boycott. And this is by Carmine Sabia over at bizpackreview.com, posted on the 23rd of August. Now, what Carmine is talking about here is there's been a big backlash with PayPal. And I went back through some of my emails with PayPal and everything and found this. I'm like, wow. PayPal, like a lot of corporations in America that want to get political, okay, that want to, and I'm not condemning, if you want to get political, fine. But you have to understand who your customer base is. Like Chick-fil-A. In the business model, they have Christian values that they espouse to. They're not open. They said they're not going to be open on Sundays. They're not. I know a lot of businesses, mom and pop businesses around, that aren't open on Sundays, and they do fantastic. And Chick-fil-A does fantastic with it. And another thing, he supports traditional marriage. He's against abortion. And just because his personal views as a business, he's been attacked. The whole brand for Chick-fil-A has been attacked. They are very generous. There's story after story where someone came in and was looking for a handout, and he ended up getting a job there at Chick-fil-A, but they took care of his immediate needs, but then they offered him a job and offered to help get him going, to be a productive citizen, and that's like, they didn't run to the government for that type of program. But yet, because they do these type of things, there's people out across the fruited plains that condemn him for doing so. Because he's doing a Christian act. Because he has certain beliefs that align with his Christian beliefs. And I think that's fantastic. But when you get outside of your business model, and you don't know who your customer base is, if PayPal's customer base was all liberal, first off, they'd been out of business a long time ago. But if their customer base was all liberal, they wouldn't have had a problem with this. But the problem is these people come up with these fantastic business models like PayPal, Amazon, these other places, and then they let their... And I honestly, I don't know too many conservative businesses that got in trouble for doing this, but it seems like these liberal business owners, like the folks that own Google Alphabet, who owns Google and YouTube, the folks over at Twitter, dare I go on, Facebook, they're very anti-freedom, liberally minded, progressively minded folks that are trying to run their business on that business model, and then they're wondering why they're losing. I said the other day, I got to correct this. I said the other day that someone's posted that Twitter was down to 16 cents a share. That was incorrect because I was doing something yesterday and I was checking this out. Twitter's down to $16 a share, which is almost an all-time low for Twitter. But anyway, they run their businesses on a ideology like social media. The business who owns the platform should stay out of the politics end of it. They should guard against terrorism, vulgarity, pornography, stuff like that. But anything beyond that is part of free speech, and they should defend that. But they're not, and they're getting in lots of trouble. Matter of fact, they're getting in so much trouble that there's challengers starting to come up. VidMe, Gab AI, Minds.com are three of the big ones that are actually up-and-comers that could challenge Facebook and Twitter and YouTube. And if they do, and their business model is, and Patreon's another one. They're, even though like Patreon, Mr. Conte, he's liberal in his thinking, but as a businessman, he understands that if he adheres to the principles of freedom of speech and liberty, he's going to have a good business. If he doesn't go in there and censor folks. Now they have rules that contributors have to abide by. If you break those rules, you're gone. Now they're revamping, a rebuttal process or a review process there to give people a second chance or whatever. But getting into this article about PayPal, PayPal has backtracked amid public backlash it received banning some conservative websites from utilizing its payment platform. The American Freedom Defense Initiative and Jihad Watch initially had their accounts banned because they were labeled as hate sites by the Anti-Defamation League and the Southern Poverty Law Center. Now, again, we've talked about both of these. Anti-Defamation League and the Southern Poverty Law Center are ultra uber anti-freedom folks. They are so far on the left, they're almost out of any group. That's how far to the left they are and progressive in their politics. And for these two groups to label anybody a hate group is laughable at the extreme, because they are the very epitome of what a hate organization is. Both of them, the Anti-Defamation League and the Southern Poverty Law Center. I cannot stress that enough. On Monday, Jihad Watch shared an email, and this would have been Monday the 21st, it received informing that its account had been reinstated. And the taking down their accounts or shutting down their accounts had happened weeks before that. Okay, and I'm not going to read through that. You can read the letter he got, the email. Jihad Watch Director Robert Spencer declared it a victory, but vowed that he would not use the payment service again. PayPal was inundated with complaints and cancellations of accounts from people who understand that my work is not hateful and that it's not hate to oppose jihad terror and Sharia oppression, he told the Daily Caller. And so they suddenly decided I wasn't a hate group after all. Spencer told the Caller that PayPal did not conduct an investigation, but rather caved to pressure from a ProPublica hit piece on the website. ProPublica is funded by George Soros, but it claims to be an independent nonprofit newsroom that produces investigative journalism in the public interest, according to the Caller. They never made a thorough review of Jihad Watch, either when they banned it or when they restored it, Spencer said. They just blow with the wind. This isn't over. The left knows this and will blow harder. We will have to fight harder to retain our freedoms. PayPal's change of mind came after a boycott PayPal campaign was launched on social media, led by anti-radical Islam activist Pamela Geller, who was also banned. So PayPal becomes the latest company to discriminate against people who don't support their cute little liberal agenda. Nice. And so PayPal got some hot water. Now PayPal, if they don't have customers that use their service, or I have a credit line with PayPal, if they have enough people go, that's going to really, really hurt their business. And they don't understand who use their services. A lot of conservatives, a lot of folks in the freedom crowds out there use their services on a daily basis to do online, online purchasing and that. So it amazes me how these companies want to get into politics. Not that I agree with the politics of the Washington Post, but at least the owner of the Washington Post is keeping, as far as I can see, is keeping his politics out of Amazon. Because when you run your business on anything but free market capitalist ideology and start allowing politics to run your business, eventually, folks, real quick here, eventually, if Mark Zuckerberg doesn't change his model, Facebook is going to go the way of the dodo bird. If Twitter and YouTube and Google don't change their business model, eventually someone's going to come up along that is using free market ideas, capitalistic ideas, to build their brand. They're going to keep politics out of it, protect free speech, protect folks as much as they can from terrorism, pornography, child pornography, all that kind of stuff, all that bad stuff, and just let freedom of speech fall where it may, and not get into the subjective ideology of hate speech. Okay, and they're going to come up and literally kick the butts of Facebook and Google and Twitter and YouTube. It's inevitable. The laws of economics dictate that that's exactly what's going to happen. And PayPal's turned course. And just a side note from this, before we get in our next article, I was listening to the Tom Woods show, and I was listening to, he had Lou Rockwell on there, and they were sharing an article where somebody's talking about buying out CNN. And that corporation is free market, capitalist, you know, they don't get into politics. And that has, they've actually interviewed some folks at CNN, that has folks at work at CNN scared. Because they may be out of a job. Because even these news anchors like at CNN, they allow their liberal bias to rule the day. Instead of reporting the news accurately and truthfully, they have their liberal bias in there. And this company's looking to possibly buy them. I can't remember who they said it was. They did say it was a more conservative free market company. So CNN's days may be numbered. If they get bought out, you may not see dolts like Don Lemon on the screen anymore, or Van Jones, at least on CNN. They might go to MSNBC or somewhere else, but you're not going to see them on CNN if somebody buys them up and turns it back into what it's supposed to be. And that's, you know, I think that would be a good thing. I honestly think that would be a good thing for CNN and the rest of the news outlets out there. All right. All right, got 11 minutes left. I guess I hit all the big ones that I wanted to hit. There is an article, I'm not going to get to it, it's like 5 or 6 pages long. But remember on Monday Monday and Tuesday, we were talking about taxes and tariffs were one of the biggest causes of the Civil War outside of slavery. I mean, I believe it was bigger than slavery. Slavery was a part, but the North didn't push that until they were getting their butts handed to them during the Civil War. Then they got the sympathy vote with the Emancipation Proclamation and that. But anyway, understanding the Morrill, Morrill, tariff, and this is by Mike Scruggs over at the Tribune Papers. Now he posted this back on January 5th, 2014, but it talks about the tariff, the pre-Civil War tariff that was leading up to the Civil War and the southern states, saying, you know, this is, again, our revolution was based on not solely on taxes, but that was a big part of it. You know, taxation without representation. You're not listening to us. You do away with the laws that we put in place in our colonies because you can. You know, just you're acting like a tyrant. And this is exactly what was happening during the Civil War. Abraham Lincoln, and this happened before Abraham Lincoln became president, but he was still on the political scene. The Whigs at the time were big government type folks, and they were being tyrants to the South. They benefited greatly from this tariff, but it was actually destroying the South financially, and the North, you know, they didn't care because the industrialists up in the North were making money hand over fist, didn't care about the agriculture of the South, and so there was a lot of contributing factors. And I think, in my mind, I think the biggest one, and I don't have Thomas DiLorenzo's book, The Real Lincoln. I should get it today in the mail, and that's on my list to read. But economically, that's what was happening in the South. There's another really good article over at Mises.org. This is Gun Control Laws Have Failed in Latin America, and this is by Jose Nino over at Mises.org. And Jose goes through and really lays out some good arguments of why gun control never works. Gun control only hurts the law-abiding citizen. It doesn't affect the criminals at all. And I still hear almost daily on newscasts and stuff like that where lawmakers are saying, we've got to figure out a way to keep the guns out of the bad guys' hands. You're never going to do it. I don't care how many laws you put. The only way you're ever going to do that is if you destroy every single gun in the world. And even then, you're not going to keep the guns out of the hands of criminals because they're going to figure a way to build them. So the only other way to take care of things is allow people to defend themselves. Allow them to exercise, and I hate that word allow, but some of these southern countries are so Marxist in their thinking, and we have a lot of states and cities that are thinking that way in the United States. Well, we're not going to allow you to practice your Second Amendment rights because we don't think you're exercising them right, or we don't think you're understanding what the Second Amendment means. When in actuality, they're the ones that don't understand what the Second Amendment means, or if they do, they don't care, because they just want control over you. So this is a good article about gun control laws and what's happening down in Latin America and how these gun control laws have failed. And you look in Venezuela, they have some really restrictive gun laws, especially since Hugo Chavez. And now the people don't have guns. And they can't defend themselves against a tyrannical government. And every tyrannical government that has ever risen in the history of mankind has always tried to keep the weapons out of the hands of the people that they're ruling, because they know if these people can get a hold of weapons, I don't care if they're bows and arrows or swords and spears, if they can get a hold of these weapons, they can defend themselves. And if they can defend themselves, they might be able to topple that government through force, that illegitimate tyrannical government. And the tyrants in the United States understand that. These mayors like Rahm Emanuel in Chicago is nothing but a petty little tyrant. And he's trampling all over the Second Amendment rights of the citizens that live in the city of Chicago. And he's allowed to get away with it. I don't understand that in this country. I do not understand how these governors and how these city mayors can just arbitrarily take away people's right to defend themselves. And the criminal element knows that. Do you know why crime here in Pennsylvania, in the cities in Pennsylvania, isn't as high as it is like in other cities? At least the cities that don't have gun control laws. I know Pittsburgh and Philadelphia have severe gun restrictions, and they have a lot of crime. But you go to other cities like Dallas and Houston, compared to Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, they have low crime. And one of these days I'm going to get the research back out about that and try to update that and talk a little bit about the Second Amendment in these other cities. Now, the last article I want to get to here in the last 6 minutes of the show, and this is what I wish I had this Sunday when I was talking to my son. This is by Ibrahim B. Ndoba from FEE.org, the Foundation for Economic Education. And there are just a bunch of Austrian economists over there at FEE. They don't matter, right? Oh my. Anyway, let me do some. Okay, 5 reasons Marxism has nothing to offer millennials. For millennials looking to shake off a dull weekend with a good economics or philosophical book, Marxism is one topic you might want to avoid. Anyone who has taken the time to read either Karl Marx or Friedrich Engels would hopefully realize just how lucky they are to live in a relatively free society. But for those who do manage to find some merit in Marxism, here are 5 things every millennial should consider before subjecting their minds to the oft-appealing ideology. 1, millennials love choice. Okay? Millennials love choice. Marxism rejects it. Again, that article with the editorial over at the WashPo. You know, oh, Satan loves sovereign individuals or individual sovereignty. No, he doesn't. He doesn't want you to have a choice. He wants to eliminate that other choice and make you choose things he wants. So millennials love choice, but Marxism rejects it. And I'm not going to read through every one of these because time will fail me. 2, violence is the Marxist way. Again, this one here I do want to read because it's applicable to what's happening today. Karl Marx believed that violence was one of the primary means to defeat the capitalist order. For example, he responded to the 1849 counter-revolution in Vienna by explicitly encouraging his followers to embrace terrorism. Marx wrote, "There's only one way in which the murderous death agonies of the old society and the bloody birth throes of a new society can be shortened, simplified, and concentrated, and the way is revolutionary terror." Hey, good morning, Shadow Warrior at Blog Talk Radio. How you doing? This is applicable to today because this ideology has permeated our colleges today. We have so many Marxists that are teaching at colleges and universities, it isn't funny, and they brainwashed these millennials out there to think that violence is the only way. It's the only way for a rebirth of a country or for a birth of a country. 3, Marxism discouraged public dissent. In Marxism, in communism, there is no freedom of speech. In National Socialism, there is no freedom of speech. You do not have the right under those 2 extreme ideologies, which are authoritarian both. there is no room for freedom of speech, right to redress your government. No, it doesn't happen because the government is all powerful. The government knows what you need, so therefore there's no need to redress the government, period. And so Marxism discourages public dissent, and that's exactly what's happening today. The Antifa out there, they don't look at what they're doing. They really don't. And they don't understand what's wrong with what they're doing. They think it's in defense. In defense of what? Like I said, you got a part of the population that calls itself white supremacist that's below 0.0006% of the population. Like I said, you couldn't even fill up a small community college with the members in the white supremacist movement in this country. But the Antifa, Marxists are all over our universities. Millennials glob onto this. All over our universities. And you see what happens when a guy like Milo Yiannopoulos, one of the most unintimidating human beings you're ever going to see, they about burnt down University of Southern California, Berkeley, because he was going to come there and speak, because they didn't agree with what he thought. They thought it was hate speech. They were, words are escaping me now as the program's winding down. They were offended. They were offended by his speech. Fourth, Marxism is the gateway to communism. And folks, history tells you this. I don't even have to go through this lesson, but if you go back and look at history, that's exactly where Marxism goes. Marxism has this utopian idea about how society should be formed, but the only way to get there is if you have a totalitarian government that takes away everybody's rights and try to force people to go that way. And it has never worked in the history of man. And finally, communism, the fifth one, tear down this wall. Communism ended in Eastern Europe in 1989. And since then, greater economic freedom has made governments more accountable to its people. Nowadays, criticizing the state is a fundamental right in most countries. It is highly unlikely that millennials would support the reversal of history when the old world is a better place to live than in today. And that, along with everything else, is over my show notes page today. And that's the music. We're winding down. Boy, that hour and a half went real quick. I'm glad you made it at the end of the show, Shadow Warrior. Hopefully you can join a little earlier next time. Maybe you're listening to me in a rebroadcast here in a podcast. So this has been the Dan Clements Show. I'm your host, Dan Clements, your constitutional warrior. Remember, if you aim at nothing, you hit it every time. Have a great rest of the day and have a good weekend. And remember, on Sunday, attend the Church of God's Choice, and you'll be better for it. We'll see you Monday at noon. Have a blessed weekend.
Thank you for using Blog Talk Radio. Goodbye.